Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to a special Melissa Institute training session. My name is Etioni Aldarondo Antonini. I'm a lifelong clinical psychologist, violence prevention researcher, advocate for those in need, and author. I'm honored to serve as the executive director of the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention and Treatment in Miami. For 29 years, the Melissa Institute has been a trusted source of information on violence prevention, safety, safe communities, and mental health worldwide. Today, more than 100,000 people from over 138 countries have benefited from the Institute's educational resources and trainings. In addition, we frequently consult with and provide research-based information on violence prevention, mental health treatment, trauma-informed care practices, and ways to bolster resilience to organizations locally in South Florida and across the country. It is exciting for us always to kind of like come to these trainings and to see, for example, in today's sessions, we have dozens of registered participants from Miami-Dade and from across the country. We noticed some people from Kansas, from Ohio, and other parts of the country. Thank you for joining us and welcome all. Please be aware that the Institute's trainings, like the one that you're now participating on, they're about to participate on, and the educational materials accessible through our website and YouTube channels are prepared with the guidance and support of the renowned members of our scientific board and are available to you for free. All we ask in exchange is that you use this information and the materials that we provide to you to support your efforts to repair the world. And if your situations allows it, please consider donating to support our programs. A little bit of home economic issues before we start. For those of you who are wanting to get continuing education credit, please make sure to follow the guidelines that provided by your accrediting boards, and also be on the watch out at the end of the talk for a phrase. It's a secret phrase that is going to come out on the chat, which you're going to need to write in the form before you get the credit. It's a way for us to verify that you completed the training. Okay, so we'll remind you again of that as we go through. Today, we're excited to bring to you a special presentation, as I said, on Choose Him Wisely, research-based guidelines to help women stay clear of dangerous relationships. Research-based knowledge and clinical practice, like those that you are about to hear about today, are essential antidotes to the despair that can arise from policies and practices that too often harm rather than heal. By grounding our counseling and interaction with students in evidence and compassion, and with clients with evidence and compassion, we can build pathways of hope, fairness, and resilience to help everyone really thrive. Today, we have the honor of hosting two giants of the field of mental health research and treatment, Dr. David Wexler and Dr. Donald Meichenbaum. I'm gonna ask them to take charge of the talk right now and to introduce themselves and to let us know the journey we're gonna be, they're gonna take us together today. Thank you for being with us, David and Don.
Thank you, Etioni, for that introduction. This is Don Meichenbaum. I want to welcome everyone and thank you for your attendance and interest, and moreover, commend you on your good judgment in being here. This is Violence Prevention, Domestic Violence Month, and we are both honored to be the opportunity to present. I, for my part, am presenting from Buffalo, New York, and I will turn it over to David Wexler, my co-author, to introduce himself, and then we'll give you a game plan for today. Okay, David.
Thank you. Okay, Don, I'll try to make this very brief because you're not here to hear about my resume, but I've been doing work in the field of what I would call relationships in conflict up to and including domestic violence and physical abuse in relationships for almost 4 decades now. And I've written 8 books on various aspects of this subject and developed a lot of treatment programs, which I know some of you may be, have training in. It's called the STOP program, and we use that program throughout the world in military and civilian settings for treating domestic violence abusers. So my passion with this work is really is primarily coming from helping men change their ways, essentially, and be better partners to women in more everyday relationships, as well as in relationships that have gone all the way to abuse and violence. And also to help the partners of these men either manage it better, find ways to get out, be clear about what the warning signs are, and that's really what our focus is today. So, Don, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, so I have been the research director of the Melissa Institute for 28 years, and we have a number of valuable resources well beyond the topic that we're going to discuss today. So as you will see, we encourage you to go on the Melissa Institute website in order to download additional materials by myself, as well as previous presenters who have participated in this kind of program. So I am going to hook up with David and provide running commentary as he works you through our book, which is just recently coming out, called Choose Him Wisely. I thought it might be interesting to tell you a bit about the origins of this book and my collaboration with David. Kind of an interesting story. And along the way, we will clearly welcome your comments, reactions, and questions, and take a period of time to do so at the end of the session. So quite simply, let me start off by saying that 3 years ago, my dear wife, Marianne, was killed in an automobile accident run over in Clearwater, Florida. At that time, my wife and I owned a little house in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Well, for the last 2 summers, my granddaughter, Anna, came and stayed with me. Now, interestingly, Anna was the oyster constable in a place called Wellfleet, Florida, where she would grow and harvest and monitor oyster growth. Now, living with a young lady like that is a unique experience, because I was sort of sharing the home with her, and each Monday night, she would turn on television and she would watch a program called The Bachelorette. So I was sort of captured with her, and I would listen to the questions that the Bachelorette asked their prospective mates as to who would be a partner. Well, I would then argue with my granddaughter that the Bachelorette kept asking the wrong questions. I made a list of questions that women should use when they're choosing a mate to assess the violence potential of a prospective partner. Given the high incidence of abusive women being victims, I thought she should know it as she was beginning her dating career. Well, soon after those summers, I had the unfortunate incident this last year. I'm now 85 years of age, of having a heart attack. That is, my heart stopped for a total of 14 minutes. And they rescued me and put me in a rehab for 2 months. Now, unfortunately, the rehab setting had multiple cases of COVID. So I was confined in my room. I couldn't leave for 2 months. I had this collection of questions that I had initiated with my granddaughter. So I was thinking, what the hell am I going to do with these questions? So I shared them with my collaborator, David Wexler. And out of our discussion of that emerged the book, Choose Him Wisely, which I'm really proud of. I think it's really a good choice. And what we came up with that you will hear over the course of today are 5 strategies that we developed that women might be able to placate. That is, if they read this book and followed these steps, then maybe they can make wise choices. The steps, as you will see, have to do with identifying red flags or warning signs as to love bombing, ways in which the women can trust their gut in order to ascertain their safety, the degree to which they develop the art of questioning in order to identify risk and protective factors, the degree to which they could use social media, and the degree to which they could use trusted friends, as well as perform personal experiments. We will systematically take you through each of these, as my co-author has developed a remarkable PowerPoint to do all of these things. Oh, 2 other things before I turn it over to him. One is, I have announced, since I've given similar talks like this, that if somehow the producers of The Bachelorette are listening to this presentation, we are both available for consultation for their program. Here's the other item. I would like to challenge you, the audience, with the following. I'm going to enumerate a list of prominent, talented women. And as I enumerate these names, I want each of you to think about, what do all these women have in common? Okay, here goes. Tina Turner, Aretha Franklin, Maria Carey, Whitney Houston, Pam Anderson, LaToya Jackson, and even in my day, Doris Day. Now, for a moment, what do you think each of these women have in common with each other? It turns out that each of these women have hooked up with men who either psychologically or physically abuse them. So here's the question before us. How do such smart, attractive women hook up with a guy who eventually is going to take advantage of them and abuse them in one form or another? What exactly did they miss? What have they been or should have been looking for in order to assess the violence potential of prospective partners? That's what today's presentation is all about. And if you know someone, if you have a daughter or a granddaughter, if you have a relative who's in the midst of dating, then this book is for you. And although we have chosen to label the book Choose Him Wisely, I want each of you to know that the red flags, warning signs, questions, and activities you should engage in is true that men should look for in the partners of violent women. In about 50% of the cases, violent women are often the initiator of these activities. Moreover, these same warning signs apply in the case of gay and lesbian homosexual couples. So our net is really much broader than just women choosing men. I hope that you will take advantage of all of the programs that David has initiated, and I will turn it over to him to describe where we're going.
Okay, thank you, Don. Every time that Don tells some stories, I learn something new about his life. So I learned a few more things today. Thanks very much. And now let's plunge into more of the nuts and bolts. Here's a quickie summary or quickie introduction of some of the things that are really going to highlight here. We know that there are certain predictors from the research and from decades of clinical experience, our own and plenty of other people's. We know that the best predictor of your future relationship with your partner is things that are happening in your current relationship. The next best predictor is his behavior in the past before you. And there's one more predictor called trust your gut. And all those things we'll be elaborating on. The book we're talking about that Don's referring to just came out, actually was just released this past week. Choose Him Wisely, How to Identify a Safe Partner. And this is our little PR for it. It's available in paperback now through the publisher, bookbaby.com, through my organization in San Diego, my nonprofit, rtiprojects.org. It's available in ebook from BookBaby and Amazon and other booksellers will have it in December. So, that's where you can get this information and more. When we wrote this book, as Don explained the origin of it, we put together what we thought were some of the key information that we assembled from research and our own experience about these different predictors and red flags and warning signs. And then Don came across the story of Gabby Petito, which many of you, of course, are very familiar with, especially those of you from Florida. And we realized that there were key elements of the Gabby Petito story that were very, unfortunately, illustrative of some of the ways in which a relationship turns south in terms of one partner, and we're talking typically now about male partners versus female partners, so I'll just use those pronouns, about the man turning against the woman in some way that becomes controlling, possessive, psychologically and or physically abusive. And so we integrated some of the anecdotes that people have learned about Gabby Petito's story. And by the way, for those of you not familiar with it, Gabby Petito was a young woman, went off on a long a driving trip where she was developing her video blog with her boyfriend. They were gone for months, and one thing led to another. She ends up dead. He killed her, and he wrote a note confessing that and actually killed himself. And in hindsight, there were a lot of different things that people looked at as saying, oh, there was this sign and there was this piece of information. And the story really caught international attention. We integrated some of this, and then we approached Gabby Petito's family. Her mother and stepfather, Nicole and Jim Schmidt, have started a Gabby Petito Foundation in her honor and memory, essentially to do with what a lot of people have done when tragedy strikes their life, to do things so that other people are less likely to suffer the same fate. And fortunately, we've really gotten their full support for our book and this project. And they say in their endorsement of our book, quite simply, we sincerely believe that if our daughter, Gabby Petito, had learned about domestic violence, whether in school, through conversations, or for a book like ours, her life could have been very different. So we're very appreciative of their support, fully on board. We are on parallel paths in terms of our passion about what we want to offer particularly women, but anybody in the world about relationships. And for those of you who are interested, we strongly suggest you check out their foundation online, and they would welcome all contributions to their particular cause. So with predicting abuse, the first category we're going to talk about here is red flags. And Reddit did a survey in 2021 asking readers the following question: what are the early signs of an abusive partner that you've personally experienced? And they came up with some of the following items. They don't respect your boundaries. They say their ex was a bitch, their boss was an asshole, their bad luck with other people seems uncanny. They'll find a ways to separate you from your friends and loved ones. Whatever you do, they always make it sound like it's nothing. Like whatever you do, they always make it sound like it's nothing important. They're downgrading and belittling of the things that are important to you. They say, if you love me, you'll do this for me. There's all sorts of love tests. They make promises, but they never keep even the little ones. They make subtle criticisms of you. They never quite are able to fully take responsibility and say, I'm sorry, in a real straightforward way. And you can read through some of the more of the examples here. So we took these rich everyday examples, and one of the ways that we've then gone ahead and organized them are the following. One key category of red flags, things, these are things to look for particularly in the earlier signs of a relationship, that don't always predict there's going to be abuse, or certainly not something as horrible as somebody dying, like with Gabby Petito, but they are flags, and they are things that it behooves women in these situations to really pay attention to, and at least be more alert to the possibility that they may be ending up with the wrong guy. It's a lot early on. He says, you're the only one who understands. I'm the only one who cares about you. I never met anyone like you before. It's a whirlwind of attention. They often start out subtle, then they become like controlling behaviors, maybe answering your phone or giving you directives that often described as suggestions about what you should wear or eat or read or even think. Now, related to this is that this attention is too much, too soon. He wants to be together all the time, right away. He comes across as just a little too charming and smooth, tries to sweep you off your feet and has a flair for the romantic. He charms you with talk about a future together. Don, I think you said you might want to mention one of your anecdotes here about the.
So yeah, I do. Well, first of all, apropos of what David's describing, one of the things that we as an audience should recognize is that aggressive behavior is relatively stable over the course of one's lifetime. In fact, the likelihood of an individual becoming aggressive is as stable as is your IQ over the course of your life. So the likelihood of us being able to identify risk factors early on is quite prevalent. In fact, Dan O'Leary has studied dating behavior among high school students, and he reports that up to 40% of high school students evidence some form of violent behavior. So while current behavior is highly predictive, as David is highlighting, it's also important to recognize that prior behavior, whether the person has evidence of aggressive behavior in previous relationship, is something that we will highlight. So here's my observation on love bombing. Having some recognition of these kinds of warning signs, I have 4 children, and my children bring home prospective partners. So I, like a good father, as well as an astute clinician, have in my head a 2x2 box. So I have a notion of risk and protective factors both current and past. And here I am, meeting each of these prospective partners of my 4 kids. Well, one of these, my daughter, brings home a mate, and lo and behold, not does he sweep her off her feet, he brings my wife a homemade lemon meringue pie. I swear to God, for a moment I thought he was love bombing my wife. You know, it's bad enough I have my daughter being concerned about this. Well, anyway, these women are often, like my daughter were, highly susceptible. They were looking for a prospective mate. And all of the attention they received, all of the gifts and the like, were part and parcel of something that gave warning. I will tell you how this all emerged over the course of life. Fortunately, she's no longer with that one guy, but the pie was terrific.
So,
Okay,
so
David.
thank you, Don. So the moral of the story is beware of the lemon meringue pies.
At least in this case.
And in this case, right? And actually, we're joking about this, but of course, this is a serious subject. But I do want to be careful that we don't mean to suggest that a guy who is really treating a woman in very special fashion and is showing a lot of affection early on in a relationship, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to turn out to be a psychopath. Sometimes that can just be exactly what it is, that he's being loving and caring. But there is there is research specifically to say that when it's by some measure, and it's difficult to quantify, too much and it's too soon, that often means that that he's trying too hard, and that he's not going to be able to back up what appears to be love and affection, not going to be able to back it up with substance over time. So it's a warning sign. It's not an automatic, like, never continue with a guy like that. It might turn out fine, but it's definitely a warning sign. Okay, next up.
Love bombing is only one of several strategies that we're going to highlight. You know, and it should give you pause to consider these other strategies that are going to be discussed.
Right. Another thing that is seen as a red flag is jealous and controlling behavior. And, my perspective on this is a little bit of jealousy in a romantic relationship is actually pretty normal. It's actually a little weird when there's no jealousy whatsoever. But we're talking about jealousy really getting out of control. And I'll talk about this research a little bit later from Sandra Brown's work. Many women who become attached to dangerous men report that at least at first, they found the jealousy very flattering. He must really love me if he gets so jealous about losing me. But what we found is that that's not what it means. It doesn't mean that he really loves you. It means he really needs you, and needs you in the sort of the more destructive way of needing and clinging to somebody, and he needs to control you. And it really represents an insecure attachment style, and particularly anxious attachment style, where the guy we're talking about is more likely to perceive threats of rejection or abandonment. And we all know what happens when somebody excessively perceives threats of rejection or abandonment. They tend to get controlling and often tend to get aggressive towards the person who it seems like has threatened them or trying to take something away from them in this fashion. So the early signs of jealousy do show up a lot with some of the more difficult and dangerous men that we're talking about. And it's, although it can be flattering to a certain extent for sometimes for women to experience that, it's really important to distinguish between genuine caring about the attachment and being too easily threatened by its possible loss, especially early in the relationship. And we see evidence with the Brian and Gabby. Brian is the name of Gabby's partner who killed her. Gabby's friend observed that Brian had jealousy issues. I mean, she says, I mean, you could see right through it after hanging out with them just a few times. There was reported that Brian often felt neglected and possessive and disregarded anything that made Gabby happy. Somebody said, honestly, it seemed like a jealousy problem, which I understood because if you look at Brian, you look at Gabby, and you're like, Gabby, you could have anyone in this entire world. Isolation, another red flag. If he tries to isolate you from your family and friends, it may start out subtly, may criticize your friends and family, try to convince you that he's the only person who really understands you. Now, what would motivate some guy to do that? It's usually insecurity again. It's an overwhelming need to have you available to serve his needs. Plus, he's worried that he's going to lose you to others if you spend too much time away. And maybe you'll get influence. Maybe other people will point out to you that some aspects of him or this relationship are not so hot. That's a threat to this particular guy. And that isolation may again appear like, oh, he loves me so much, he wants to be with me all the time. But it's I don't know how else to put it. It's not a healthy pattern. And one of the things that we've learned is a potential predictor of the dangers or abusive behavior we're talking about. Secure men and secure women do not worry so much about this. They do not, I mean, everybody feels threatened sometimes in their relationship, but the more secure the person is, the less threat they have by normal, innocuous things like your partner spending time with their family or their friends. Another example with Brian and Gabby. A friend reported that Brian and Gabby were supposed to go out one night, but Brian didn't want her to, and he stole her ID, so she couldn't go to this club or bar that she was going to. And the comment was, this was really upsetting to her. You're engaged. It's not supposed to be like that. The friend said that she felt like it was Brian saying, let me isolate her. If I can get her away from her job, I can get her away from her friends. She only will have me. She said that Brian didn't want Gabby working, and when she did, he wanted her at jobs where he could keep an eye on her. Blaming. Another pattern we see that seems to be predictive of things turning out this wrong way. For example, why wouldn't you text me back right away when you knew I would feel bad? You must not love me. There's all sorts of love tests. If you really love me, you'll have sex with me. If you really love me, you'll respond to my text, drop everything you're doing and respond to my text immediately. If you really love me, you won't go to that party, if that family party, you'll stay home with me because I really need you. Again and again, being tested like this. And the question you can ask yourself is, does your partner blame you for not paying him enough attention, for not reading his mind? Does he get bored and restless and blame you for his mood? Does he do something scary, then says, oh, I was just kidding, and blame you for being too sensitive? Does he blame you when things go wrong? Another pattern to really watch out for is expressions of contempt and disgust. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the work of John Gottman and his institute in his clinic in University of Washington in Seattle. One of his core concepts is what's called the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. And he's identified that expressed contempt and disgust in a relationship is one of the most toxic behaviors and one of the most powerful predictors of future disaster in a relationship. Either the relationship just turning out badly, breaking up, potential abuse and violence, etc. And now, the contempt and disgust we're talking about is not just like everyday criticism, because in every relationship, even what we'd all consider the most healthy or successful relationships, people get critical. Sometimes they get annoyed with each other and take it out on them. May not be pretty, but it's normal. It's not pathological. But we're talking about nasty criticism or character accusations. If your partner belittles you, if your partner is sarcastic with you, if your partner says things like, what are you, stupid? How come you couldn't figure this out? Those kinds of comments are classic examples of contempt and disgust. And it's especially toxic if it's in front of others, if it's in front of children, friends, family, it can take an unbearable toll on the partner's self-esteem. And if so, the advice to women, or obviously to men, or people in same-sex relationships, is that if you start to pick up these messages of contempt and disgust, look out. That is a dangerous warning sign that it either needs to be confronted or needs to be fled from. Another pattern that we and the research have identified is what's known as entitlement. The partner we're talking about says things like, you know, these things are important to me, so you should let me choose what movie we go to, what we're having for dinner, where we're going on vacation, what clothes you're going to wear. It's so important to me. If you really love me, you would let me have my way with this. And if you don't, it means you don't really care. I'm really stressed, so you need to be there whenever I need you. I can't believe you forgot my birthday after what I did for you on your birthday. Or can't you see this isn't a good time to talk to me? You're always picking the wrong time just to stress me out. The theme here is me, me, me. Don't you understand how the things you're doing or the things you're not doing are affecting me? And if you really love me, you would be more attentive. And unfortunately, when there's this me attitude, this I spelled it, an entitlement, that it's not reciprocated. There's not the equal amount of attention to the genuine needs or making accommodations to the needs of the other person. And this pattern is crucial. Even with somebody who has a strong entitlement streak, some of these attitudes may not show up right away in a relationship. In fact, what we know is that if somebody showed all these different behaviors on their first date or in the first week, the relationship wouldn't go anywhere. These things tend to slowly work themselves in over time, and sometimes you see little inklings of them early on that should just raise some of the hairs on the back of your neck a little bit and be concerned. Sometimes they don't really go anywhere dangerous. That's great, but oftentimes they do. But they don't always they're not right. Like these behaviors are not in your face right away in a typical situation that we're talking about. One more is red flags is rationalization of past destructive relationship behavior. He may tell you about some of the things he's done in the past in a relationship, like spying on his former partner, yelling at her, punishing her, but it's always couched in justifications, and often they're flattering towards you. That bitch just drove me to do it. That's a warning sign. And that's why I love you so much, because you're so different. That's a warning sign that can fall in the flattering category. It can be very seductive to hear, like, oh, you've had problems with other women, but I'm different. Oh, that really touches my heart. And I guess this is a moment, I don't have a slide specifically about this, but I want to make a comment about this. It concerns me that the information that we're presenting here can come across as victim blaming, basically saying, don't you know better? You should see these signs about a guy and get out. There's something really wrong with you if you don't do this, and it's ultimately your fault. That's not what we're saying. We believe that the fault of abusive behavior, if it's a man to a woman, is with the man. We're just trying to help in individuals, we're talking about women here, recognize some of the potential signs of being with a dangerous partner, not trying to say that somehow their susceptibility to some of these things is somehow their fault. So I don't know how else to explain that except just to say it over and over again, that that's really not the intent of our words, of our messages. Another red flag is what's called joking threats of violence. He says things in an argument like, I'll break your neck, I'm going to kill you. He later apologizes, but he blames you or he minimizes it. I wouldn't have said that, if you hadn't done whatever you said. Everybody talks that way. Come on, I didn't really mean it. Well, the reality is everybody does not talk that way. And most normal people do not make threats to kill their partner. They may say, I and everybody else has at times said things that we wish we hadn't said, that were aggressive or nasty or hurtful or whatever. But most people do not talk about killing or breaking somebody's neck, even in the moment of anger or conflict in a relationship. One more special note about strangulation. Gail Strack, some of you may know her work with her work with Casey Gwynn and the Alliance for Hope, and educating people throughout the world about the dangers of strangulation behaviors in relationship conflict. What we found is that, and what her research has found is that strangulation, that specific physically aggressive act, is an extremely powerful predictor of bad things to come, of repetitive violence, and ultimately of the possibility of actually killing somebody. And the strangulation, even in a semi-playful fashion, like sort of in an argument, putting somebody's hand, putting your hand around her throat, even just saying, come on, stop talking about this, or during sex, even if both people have technically agreed to it as a way to enhance sexual excitement. There's a lot of research to say that that is a true red flag about possible future danger. And many offenders don't strangle their partners actually to kill them, but they just want to let their partner know that they could kill them. There's something about actually cutting off blood and oxygen supply that sends a very powerful message. So we do know that Gabby Petito died from strangulation from her partner. We've also since found out that it was something he liked to do during sex with them. And so that was another warning sign that nobody was quite aware of, that by itself isn't necessarily going to predict, but you combine it with a lot of these other things, and it's a pretty powerful combination. Now we're moving on to another section, and Don's already given a bit of an introduction to this one about not just the red flags of what you observe in the current relationship, but the red flags of things you know or could find out about his personal history. What about his stability, his personality stability or behavioral stability? What kind of friends did he have growing up? Were his friends boys who had a lot of acting out problems, anger, aggression, academic failures? What kind of job history has he had? What's his employment history in terms of number of jobs, length of stay, reasons for leaving, etc.? Does he change jobs frequently? Does he get fired a lot, but it's always because the boss was an asshole or things like that? How about his financial decisions? Does he have a history of not following through on financial responsibilities, getting into debt, having past child support issues, taking out loans from friends and not repaying them? If he was in the military, did he have a less than honorable discharge? Again, none of these. I know plenty of people who at some time in their life had job history problems or had anger problems in their history, and I wouldn't say that as a result, I wouldn't want my daughter or anybody else I know to get involved with this guy. I don't want to write off everybody who's ever had a tough history, because a lot of people would fall in that category. But it does cause concern. It does mean you got to be a little more careful and use a few more screening strategies when you know that there's been problems in this area of history than you might with somebody who had a less troubled history in terms of the personal stability. Likewise, relationship hit. Yes, Don.
So the question is, how does a person ascertain these kinds of high-risk factors from one's past history? Well, one of the things that we included in the book as a key ability is the art of questioning. We included the best kinds of questions that a woman could ask a male that will reveal the presence of these kinds of risk and protective factors. And one of the interesting questions that I have found useful, especially as my children bring home prospective partners, is I often look to see if, in fact, the partner has a tattoo somewhere on their body that we can see there. And we've included in the book questions like, I often walk by these tattoo stores and I wonder, this is the woman asking the male, how did you choose that tattoo? People love to tell the story of their tattoos. And it turns out that the telling of the story of the tattoos opens up a can of worms as to, oh, that was my grandmother, or that was a member I was in a gang. And in fact, it turns out that men who have killed their spouse and are in prison under their right eye often have little tattoos of tears. And each tear represents someone they have had some kind of aggressive act. So one of the things that happens is that we have enumerated in the book a variety of strategies that you could pursue over and above social media and other kinds of things that we'll discuss that will give this. Finally, David, here's a final anecdote. My wife and I have a friend who was in a prior abusive relationship. A number of years go by, and she decides that she wants to try dating once again. Okay, so we don't want to see her we don't want to see her re-victimized. So she's going to go out to dinner with this guy. And she invites my wife and I to come along. So there I am, sitting across from this prospective partner with a 2x2 box in my head. And I'm filling in all of the information about risk and protective factors, both current and past. Now, when dinner is over and I'm driving home with my wife, I say to her, what do you think? Now, my wife isn't a mental health worker. Actually, she was an actress. And she says, this is high risk. And I say to her, what do you mean? It was high risk. What did he do? What did he say? What didn't he do? What didn't he say that convinces you so much that she should not hook up with this guy? And my wife looks at me and she says, you see the way he eats? I say, what do you mean, the way he eats? Well, the entire time he's talking with his mouth full. And I say to her, there has never, ever been research on high versus low risk men and their eating behavior. And she says, trust me. Well, the moral of the story is that every prospective partner my children brought home, we fed them. Who the hell knows what are the best risk and protective factors? My wife thought it had to do with social amenities, that he would eat and speak at the same time. I don't think that has made David's list, but I throw it out for you to consider in your search. It made her feel uncomfortable. And this is going to get us to the next category, which is trust your gut. And I'm married to this woman all these years, and I trust her gut, as well as the rest of her body.
Thank you, Don. You're right. This does introduce the sections coming up in a little while about trusting your gut. And knowing your propensity for turning everyday events into research studies, I foresee one more research study about watching people's eating behaviors and seeing, getting a control group of people eating a certain way. Well, I don't know how you design it exactly, but you'll figure out a way to turn Marianne's intuitive sense into solid data and research that the rest of us can benefit from.
Well, so many couples meet at Starbucks and so forth, so you could go there and do a behavioral sample. And then you're sitting at the next table, you go, uh-oh.
Okay, we'll work on it. So just filling in a little bit more about the relationship history. Does he tell you that you're starting to act just like his ex? And certainly, do you have any reason to believe he was ever violent or abusive in a previous relationship? And I do believe in men's capacity to change. And so I've seen in plenty of men in my work who've been violent in a relationship and then have changed and have never been violent again, have really turned things around. So I wouldn't want to totally rule it out, but it would sure make me nervous to find out that the answer to that question was yes. And in general, more past aggressive behavior. Did he get a lot of fights, disciplinary actions? Did he act like a bully? And the classic question that we all know is an indicator of future psychopathy. Did he ever tease or torture animals? Is he preoccupied with violent media or violent porn? That's definitely on our flag list. And if he has an aggressive history, which some, a fair amount of men do, the key isn't so much was he aggressive in the past, because some people change, but how does he talk about that? Is he proud of it? Does he brag about it? Does he blame others for it? Does he have, or in contrast, is he genuinely remorseful? Does he recognize who he was then and how he's different now? Has he made amends to the people he's harmed, etc.? Also, his own mental health or substance abuse. Does he have a history of mental illness that he's not actively getting treatment for? History of depression or suicidal thoughts? In terms of substance abuse, has substances been a dangerous force in his life? Has he acted in ways that are aggressive or abusive when using alcohol or drugs? Has he ever missed work in school, etc.? And again, I know I'm making this point repeatedly, but I want to make sure it comes through. I wouldn't say that somebody, let's say, who had a period of feeling suicidal in high school is therefore going to be an unsuccessful partner in the future, because if we use that criterion, plenty of people, men and women, we would reject them as relationship partners. People do change. People do struggle with different issues in their life. It's more a matter of how they have dealt with this, or what they have learned from this, or how are they different now, or in the case of aggressive behavior, have they taken responsibility for the things they've done? That's more of the indicator than simply a simple checklist of did they ever do something bad in the past. The bad in the past part is should draw attention, but not necessarily be a rule out. Yes, Don.
The only thing I would add is that in the book we spend some time on what is called binge drinking, and we spell out there how to assess the amount of drinking and the degree to which substance abuse is a problem for these prospective partners, or use of other drugs and the like. And therefore, in about up to 75% of the cases where there's domestic violence, there's a presence of some form of substance abuse used by one of the two partners. So the number of beers the guy drinks at a given time, the amount of time he spends at one use of some form of drugs is highly likely. And you can look at current cases of men who abuse women, of the degree to which that kind of trafficking, that kind of racketeering, that kind of binge drinking comes into play. So I just want to have these prospective partners evaluated in terms of the criteria that we included in the book.
Okay, good point. One more item here on the personal history is the family history. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the ACE study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences study. And for those of you who are not, it's a way of identifying, there's 10 different factors of, or 10 different events. Did these occur in your childhood? Were you the victim of sexual abuse, victim of physical abuse? Did you witness domestic violence? Was somebody in your family a drug abuser? Did somebody in your family go to jail, etc.? And the research has been powerful about how the correlation between a higher ACE score, the more of these traumatic or chaotic events in your family growing up, the correlation between that and a wide range of both mental health and physical health problems. And one of them that's particularly relevant for our purposes here is predicting future domestic violence. A higher ACE score is highly correlated with future acts of domestic violence. So if you find out information about your partner that he suffered through a lot of things on the ACE scale, that would, again, that would at least be raise an area of concern. Now, I saw, Etienne, you Rose, you raised a very good point in the chat I just read about protective factors, because a lot of the research has shown that that even if somebody has a tough childhood, I had a high ACE score, there are certain things that do seem to buffer the impact of those factors on the problems that many people experience. And one of the things that stands out most in the research about this is, was there somebody in your life who you could turn to, who you could rely on, even when these things were going on? Was there at least one parent who you felt like really looked out for you? Was there a therapist? Was there your football coach? Was there your priest or your minister or your rabbi? Was there your grandmother? You felt like she's the person who was really safe, who you could talk about what's going on and you could turn to and always make you feel like you're grounded. Even a single person, a single constant force like that, or multiple ones, often serve as a buffer between the original ACE number or score and the eventual symptoms that are taking place. So that sort of course points to some of the value that, many people in the audience here today, I believe, are mental health providers or counselors of various kinds. A role that we play in a young person's life in terms of helping them process or feel safe about some of their tougher experiences, that also can serve as a kind of a buffer. So again, ACE score, area of concern, not always an indicator that the person should be ruled out for as a future partner. And just to add to that, when he reflects on these exposures, what conclusions does he draw about himself? How do these early experiences impact his outlook on the future? Now that brings us to our next category, which we call the trust category. Trust your gut and your friends. Here are some key questions that we suggest that women ask themselves about their partner. And I keep saying women, but as you know, almost all of these will also apply for men seeking, who are sort of observing or checking out women, and likewise, of course, in same-sex relationships. Have I ever felt unsafe with my partner? What does my gut tell me about that? Am I ever fearful my partner will seriously hurt me? Do I feel hesitant about what I say or do because it might set off some reaction? Have I felt pressured by my partner sexually? Is he careful to get my permission before proceeding further? Do I feel comfortable and safe discussing issues with him? Can I see myself spending my future with him? And these are gut feelings. There's no measure of how unsafe you feel or how fearful you feel or how hesitant you feel. But there are signs to point out, to observe. And it's of course, like a lot of things, a lot of decisions about relationships, it's complicated and not always, like I said, not always really quantifiable. Um, I can certainly say, just in my own marriage of over 40 years now, there are certain subjects I don't really bring up with my wife because I don't think she's going to take it very well. To me, that's called normal marriage. Being recognizing that certain people are sensitive about certain things, and even though you might want to say something, you got to be careful how you say it, or you might choose not to say it at all. If you do that, if that happens selectively, I call that pretty typical and not necessarily a sign that something's wrong. But if it's pervasive, and if there's a concern that not only will it be upsetting to the partner or to the relationship, but you could put you in some sort of danger psychologically or physically, that's a trust your gut moment.
David,
Yes.
I do couples therapy, and the one skill that I try to teach couples is the ability to edit. EDIT. That is, you don't have to say every thought that goes through your head to your partner. So that I find is the most valuable skill that a couple can have in their repertoire. So I give that out as a gift. The other kind of thing is, when we talk about trust your gut, we comment in the book on the gift of fear. Do you want to comment on that gift of fear and how to accept it and who wrote it?
Yeah, The Gift of Fear is the book written by Gavin de Becker, who I believe was the former DA for Los Angeles County. I think he was in that position for a couple of decades, and he wrote this book called The Gift of. He came up with that term, or at least he popularized it, and wrote the book by that name, basically saying he was writing it particularly for women, saying trust that fear. That fear is a gift to you, giving you information about when you might feel unsafe. I think he, and certainly I, and would say that there are times when your fear might be unfounded. It's not 100% accurate, but in general, it's worth trusting. And one of the things that's one of the items that's listed on what's called the danger assessment scale, which many of you may be familiar with, Jackie Campbell's scale about trying to predict potential homicide, or what she calls femicide, of men killing women in their relationships. One of the items on that list, in addition to all the things we might think of about, does he have a history of substance abuse, and has he ever been arrested for domestic violence, and is he jealous and controlling? One of the items is, do you feel like he has the capacity to actually kill you or really hurt you? And that has been found to be one source of information that is legitimately predictive of future danger. And again, legitimately predictive doesn't mean 100% accurate, but it's damn worth paying attention to.
I might add that in the book we note the future behavior of such aggressive individuals. And it turns out that a large percentage of men who went on to perform mass shootings had a history of domestic violence. So for many different areas in the future, you could start to think about the degree to which this manifests itself in the future. I always found that interesting. And as people peruse the book, they will find innumerable examples of statistics that we included that highlight what I commented on earlier, which is the kind of consistency of aggressive behavior over the course of one's life. And this goes on into the elder abuse and so forth. So I just keep in mind these kinds of risk factors are not only with regard to domestic situations, that has to do with societal forms of violence as well.
Okay, thank you. More about trusting your gut. This is called, I call this slide, trust your eyes and ears. We really recommend that people pay very close attention to what happens in everyday situations in the relationships where there is some, I don't know, a conflict where the partner is not getting his way, or if it was reversed gender, getting her way. We're not specifically recommending that, or I don't think it's particularly valuable to actually formally rig tests for people, because I think that's a little manipulative. If I found out that some woman I was courting was purposely tested me to see how I would handle something, I wouldn't like that. I'd feel manipulated. But for better or worse, life gives us tests all the time in relationships. And I think any of us, whenever we've been in a stage of beginning to form a relationship or to move forward in a relationship, we are in our own way evaluating how this person handles things. How do they handle when I get angry? How do they handle when I'm in a bad mood? How do they handle it when the traffic is bad? How do they handle meeting my family, etc.? So we suggest you pay very close attention to what happens when the two of you really want to do something together, where he's not interested in joining you. But is he able to go along with a good attitude if it's really important to you? Or let's say you tell him you want to spend some time alone with your friends, your family, kids, whatever. Does he get resentful and controlling? Does he try to make you feel guilty for abandoning him? What happens when he's interested in sex and for whatever reason you're not? Does he pressure you? Does he try to make you feel guilty? Does he sink into a dark mood and pout? What if there's some conflict between the two of you? Does he fight dirty? Does he say deeply hurtful things? Does he make threats to leave you or hurt you in some way? There are millions of opportunities to observe how somebody handles these kinds of bumps in the road in a relationship. And what you're looking for, in other words, what is predictive of a potentially good partner, is somebody who is able to handle those moments without going too dark, without trying to make you feel guilty, without blaming you, without pouting, without becoming aggressive. I'm not saying all of us are perfect at that, but to do that only to do only minimal amounts of those things. The more dangerous partner that we're warning people against is more likely to have some of these more toxic reactions, even to the everyday little bumps in the road or differences that show up, like in these examples.
Another way of thinking about this, if I may, another way of rephrasing this is that in any relationship, you have an opportunity to use behavioral samples. Okay, and therefore, these are top two opportunities of doing observations. So we are encouraging the woman, in this case, to use her eyes and ears to see what is the nature of the response of the prospective partner and take advantage of these in order to get behavioral samples of what will be down the future. Like, for example, is this a guy who you want your children to follow? Do you want him to be an example to your children in the future or to others? It is exactly the answer to these kinds of questions plus all that we've summarized so far. You know, the red flags for love bombing, the ways in which you could trust your gut, the way in which you can now ask the art of questioning to get at high-risk factors, the degree to which you can not only trust your observations, but as we're going to see, the degree to which David's going to highlight how we could trust our friends to also give us feedback. And then we're going to discuss why women or whoever are not going to use any of this information.
Yes. Again, preview of coming attractions. In the there's a Netflix video some of you may be familiar with about the story of Gabby Petito, and in there is a video. You know, what's it called? When the police video of the time when they stopped her and Brian on the road because he was driving erratically, and they could see that the two of them were having this fight. And the officer pointed out marks on her arm and her face and told her to just be honest. She said that Brian kept telling her to shut up and grabbed her face, which had caused the injury. But she kept saying in this thing, "Oh, it's no big deal. Nothing really happened." And Brian was saying, "Oh, we just, we were arguing, and I'm sorry about that, and whatever." But here, the evidence is right there about what his physical aggression towards her, and she didn't really feel comfortable, I think, trusting her eyes and ears and body about what was happening. More of that to come in a second. One of Gabby's, here, this is another category, but now trusting friends or family. One of Gabby's best friends recalls telling Gabby that Brian's a really nice guy, but there's something a little bit off about him. A friend told her that there was a jealous side to Brian, and that he was a little bit weird. So some of this input was coming in, but like plenty of people in these situations, she found ways to minimize what some of the concerns that her friends had because she loved this guy and she was attached to him. What we found in general is that it does come in really handy to pay attention to the kind of feedback or observations that friends and family may have about your partner. Although the one caveat I would say is that I've definitely seen situations where just the opposite is true. I've seen sometimes people embarking on a very successful relationship, but for whatever reason, friends and family felt jealous of that. They felt threatened by it. The family felt like that they were going to be losing her or him in some way. And so sometimes the input from others is not that trustworthy. And I wish I had an actual a detector to say when you should listen and when you shouldn't, but that would make it all this too easy, and it doesn't work like that. But very often, if you're concerned about whether or not there's something kind of not right about our relationship, checking in with others can be extremely valuable. You've watched Jack and me together. Does the way he treats me bother you? Jack is jealous a lot. Sometimes I think it means he must really love me. Have you been with a guy like that? I think he's been under a lot of stress. That's why he's been acting this way. Does that make sense to you? Those kinds of things can be valuable to get feedback from other people, to just get a reality check. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of times the abusive partner, the potentially abusive partner we're talking about here, engages in isolation because he doesn't want you getting that much input from friends and family that might threaten his position and his role in your life. Now, Don's already mentioned this, and this is one of the most, in fact, I think this is the most important chapter in the book and the most important section in this presentation, because everything that we've talked about so far are things that are interesting, but not exactly rocket science. They're things I think that most reasonably well-informed people, not just therapists and counselors, but otherwise intelligent people might say, yeah, I could see why that's a problem. And yeah, I've noticed that, and that makes sense. We may have organized it in ways that are helpful, but it's nothing radically different. What is particularly I think, valuable for anybody trying to digest this information is this section here, which Don first suggested when we were first designing the book, and it's like I said, I think it's really central. Reasons you might disregard all this information. So many times, somebody might find themselves in a position where there are these different warning signs, these different red flags, but for whatever reason, they choose to minimize, deny, or rationalize them. If you're like many other women, you might find yourself with some of these thoughts related to attachment issues. I don't want to be alone. I really want the security of him supporting me. And this next one comes from a quote from a woman who turned out to be in an abusive relationship. No one in my life had ever made me feel so safe, loved, beautiful, and validated as he did during the early months of our relationship. I feel sorry for him because he had such a bad childhood. I thought I was the only woman who could help him face his demons. And for better or for worse, I think there are a lot of women who are particularly susceptible to that, the seductiveness of being in that role, who really see themselves as somebody who can reach a troubled guy, who can know him in a way that others don't know him, and are in this special position of connecting with him. And in some ways, I think that's a wonderful quality. I think it's great for a woman or for a man to be able to see past some of the rougher exterior and the good soul in there, and to connect there up to a point. And but after a certain point, sometimes that can create a kind of selective blindness to some of the dangerous or troublesome qualities of being in a relationship with that person, who cannot really be fully saved or rescued. In between the tough times, yes.
Oh, I just would say that I characterize these as kind of mental calisthenics, that women engage in little white lies that they tell themselves and that they tell others. And they often convey to others that you don't know him the way I know him.
Mhm.
You know, and they find various kinds of explanations, rationalizations, some kinds of expressions that lead them to sustain their relationship, even though these various red flags have been evident. We're going to talk about some of the other reasons that women may avoid separating, ending the relationship with, even though the red flags are there. But just people have the ability to cognitively reframe anything, and even under these circumstances, there needs to be some concern.
That's very well put. I appreciate that. Another variation on this theme of why somebody would see a lot of the things that we're talking about, might recognize that they're not good qualities, but still stay in the relationship and believe that it's believe in the relationship, is self-blame. Yeah, he did do those things, but it was my fault. I provoked him. He was grabbing my arm just to keep me away, or to keep me from leaving when we really should have been talking about this. I have a habit of escaping, and he was just trying to stop me. Or I've been pretty controlling lately. Or a lot of people tell me I can be kind of difficult, and hard to get along with. I was in a bad mood and I overreacted. Or I just had to have the last word, so I humiliated him about not making any money, and therefore he acted badly in that situation. All these have to do with self-blame. And in my experience over decades now, working with abuse victims, there's a tendency to believe that, I'm speaking as the victim in a victim voice right now. Since I'm not perfect and I do some things that cause problems, therefore I'm equally responsible for what goes wrong in our relationship. And I do believe there is such a thing as bidirectional abuse where both people are relatively equally responsible, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about one person has a normal level of being imperfect and sometimes difficult, and that's join the club, versus somebody else who is controlling, uh, uh, possessive, and abusive. Those are not equivalent. One person may be contributing 10% of the problem and the other person 90%, and the two people get involved in this kind of folie à deux where they create this reality of we're both equally responsible because both of us have acted imperfectly. That really contributes to in this case, the female victim minimizing or denying the behavior of the partner because somehow she feels like she's equally responsible. A little bit more about self-blame in terms of Gabby and Brian. Gabby was quoted by friends as saying things like, "I don't deserve him. I'm a bad person." And the friend's commentary was that she believed that Brian wanted her to feel that way. "I feel bad. I'm always on the phone. I should give Brian more attention." Gabby told the police, "I was apologizing to him and saying, 'I'm sorry that I'm so mean.'" This is when they were stopped on the road because he was driving erratically and she had these injuries. She said, "I'm sorry I'm so mean because sometimes I have OCD and sometimes I can get really frustrated. Not like mean towards him. My vibe is I'm in a bad mood. And I was just saying, I'm sorry if I'm in a bad mood." All of this is heartbreakingly self-blaming. Where she's saying, "Oh, because I'm in a bad mood sometimes, or I have what she's calling OCD, that somehow that was responsible for his aggressive behavior for her." And she's apologizing for doing these things that apparently provoked him. There's another category here, which we call unrealistic hopefulness. And this, we've already alluded to some of these things, but here we map it out a little bit more here. "I can change him. I can rescue him. I see the potential in him. You don't know him like I know him. He said he was sorry and he promised he wouldn't do that again. He's trying to change. He says he needs me and he's trying to stop hurting me." And related to this is what we call the normalcy issue. What the research tells us is that if in this case, if a woman was raised in a household, when she was a girl, she was raised in a household where she witnessed abusive behavior, she may come to believe that this is normal. And I don't mean normal like good, like she grows up saying, "Oh, I want that to happen in my relationship too." No, I mean, nobody thinks like that. But when it does happen, she may feel like, well, that's the way relationships are. This comes with the territory. It's just that's the way guys get sometimes, and therefore may allow him a wider berth or more tolerance, and be excessively hopeful about things turning around, about things changing. Now, I'm all for people believing in their partner, believing that somebody can change, believing somebody can change their attitude, can change their drinking patterns, can become a better parent, can be more responsible and reliable. I believe, we have a lot of humanistic attitudes in our field where we believe that people can change, but there are times when that hopefulness is unrealistic, and unfortunately, a lot of the women who have ended up in relationships with abusive men are somewhat susceptible to this unrealistic hopefulness, believing in the signs of hope, even when by most people's measures, it's not really based on reality, and they just continue to attach. We know from, Lenore Walker's cycle of violence or cycle of abuse, one of the stages in the cycle of abuse is the honeymoon stage, where the victim gets really attached to how sweet it is when things are good. And during those times they believe, okay, finally he's changing. Finally, he's going to stop drinking or treat me better, or whatever. And they get attached to that, and they forget that it just seems to keep happening again. That's what the cycle is all about. That's an example. Also, that's another way in which this unrealistic hopefulness shows up.
David,
Yes.
I might note that in the book, I want to make sure we comment on this, that we review the data that a sizable percentage of men who have been abused benefit from treatment. And we have included in the book a series of questions that someone who's engaged in abusive behavior should answer to see if they are a candidate for such kind of individual or couples therapy. That there is hope. There is unrealistic hope, as you describe here, but there is hope that abusive men can benefit from treatment. And we have included in the book a list of queries that each of these females should ask themselves and ask of their significant other to see whether there's any basis to the hope or not. Those are two things closely related to this that I want to recognize and comment on, and I'm sure you're going to add to this, is that when women are in the midst of leaving their abusive partner, that's when they are potentially most high risk for being victims. So often their fear is justified, and for whatever reason they decide to stay to protect themselves, to protect their children, and the like. The other comment that's inherent in what you're describing in terms of self-blame and the like is the degree to which a female may not want to separate or violate the relationship because their cultural group does not accept this notion, that their cultural group will in fact blame the female for her decision to be responsible for his behaving in this way. So as you go through this list of the self-blaming and the unrealistic hopefulness, the fearfulness of disengaging, the cultural expectations, and the like, I wanted to convey, as we do in the book, our criticism is not here of toxicity of men, but trying to provide women with the toolkit by which they can make an informed and safe decision. I hope I haven't taken out the wind of where you're going here, but I wanted to make sure that these got conveyed right at the outset.
No, you haven't taken the wind out at all. And I think it's really valuable to emphasize the points that you're making. So it's working. Just on this note of unrealistic hopefulness, Gabby's friend reported the following impression. I think the hardest thing to do is walk away from somebody you love. I think that's a big reason she stayed. It's because she did love him and she didn't like the way he treated her, but she thought she could fix him. Another factor that comes into play, and I think Don already sort of alluded to some of this, is fear of failing at the relationship. I want to keep my family together. My children need a dad. That's if you're a much later stage of a relationship, like with children, for example. In my group, marriage is forever. I made my bed and now I have to sleep in it. I don't think I deserve better. I can't handle what others will say if I left him. They'll blame me and I'll blame myself. I'll shame myself and my family if I tell anyone and seek help. I just don't want to fail at another relationship. If I fail again, it means something must be really wrong with me. Here's another factor that I think is important to pay attention to, and I've already made some allusion to this, but I'll just talk about a little bit, focus on a little bit more here. Sandra Brown is a researcher in, I think she's in Maryland or somewhere in the Eastern Seaboard. Um, and she's been studying for years women who are attracted to dangerous men. She's wrote a book called Women Who Love Dangerous Men, another book about how to spot a psychopath. And she's not studying the men, she's studying the women who somehow unfortunately get drawn in to men like this. And one of the factors that she's identified as being central is what she talked about, attraction to relationship intensity. And when she hears things from these women like, I've had good times and great sex with him. He really knows how to be romantic. He only gets jealous like that because he loves me so much. He's really edgy or different or interesting. I can't quite figure him out, which is intriguing to me. He wants me around all the time. He must really love me. And what of course she has concluded and tries to work with a lot of these women seeking help is that relationship intensity is not the same thing as love. It's not an experience that can create a lasting, deep, and mutual bond. And it's very, I don't know if you call it seductive. It's just very, it can be confusing to really feel like there's this special connection here, and to get the heat of that relationship, and not to and to recognize that that may not be a sign that the guy really loves me. It may be that he really needs me, and he needs to control me to meet those particular needs, which is not the foundation of a solid love relationship. With Brian and Gabby and on this subject, Gabby would often talk to friends about the blowout arguments and tense fights she had with him. When things were good, her friend says, when things were good, you'd be like, why can't I have a relationship like that? When they were bad, you'd like, oh my God, just break up and spare yourself from the drama and everyone else having to hear about it. There was a lot of up and down and intensity in the relationship, some of which apparently Gabby found compelling, even though at times I'm sure that she was really questioning it. Minimization and denial. And this, again, we've covered a little bit of this, and I think Don commented some on this also. What happens when you know there's a lot wrong with this relationship and you still want to stay? Well, this creates cognitive dissonance because on the one hand, you say my relationship is abusive. The other hand, you say, but I have self-respect as a woman and shouldn't allow myself to be treated this way. Those are incompatible, dissonant beliefs to carry. So one way to resolve this is to minimize or deny and say, well, it's not really, what I'm experiencing is not really that bad. Therefore, I can maintain my self-respect and still be in the relationship. And a lot of times it requires what Don referred to as this kind of cognitive or mental gymnastics of trying to rationalize, minimize, deny, take blame for the problems in this relationship or the problems of that partner, so that you can, in good conscience, or live in the way you can live with yourself, can still maintain the relationship that you want because of the other thing, the attachment needs, or the fact, or the good times that you're having. But that cognitive dissonance factor really is what can lead to that minimization and denial. One of the things that we recommend is what's called the line in the sand. And the line in the sand is really establishing a contract with oneself, saying, identifying certain behaviors that you've really decided are unacceptable in a relationship, and saying to yourself, and writing this down in a contract form, I will have no choice but to leave my partner if he ever, and you fill in the blank here, cheats on me, hits me, abuses the children, lies to me about his gambling, makes another suicide attempt, visits child porn sites, treats me with contempt or disgust, whatever the offenses have been, to say, as a self-respecting human being, and in this our case is here a self-respecting woman, this is my line in the sand, and I have to make a commitment that I will not no longer tolerate those behaviors. If they've been in the past, if he has learned from the past and he's no longer going to do these things, I love the guy and I can stay with him, but I cannot tolerate these. And the flip side, of course, is I'll have no choice to leave him if he ever, um, if he ever, let me get the wording right, no longer does certain things, no longer talks to me for weeks on end. In other words, if he doesn't talk to me for weeks on end, that's my line in the sand. If he never tries to find another job, that's my line in the sand. If he doesn't allow me to talk on the phone with my friends or family, that's my line in the sand. And it is really crucial for if women are going to try to see their situation clearly, to recognize that they have a lot of conflict. They may want the relationship, but they are troubled by it, and they may be concerned about what it might become. But to identify some of the key behaviors that they are making a contract with themselves, they will no longer tolerate, and will leave the relationship if and when it comes to that. And speaking of leaving the relationship, we hope it never comes to this. And many of the women we're speaking about and speaking to in this book are not going to end up in a situation where they are in serious physical danger. Some will. Gabby Petito was, but plenty of other women are just in danger, maybe, of being in a relationship that makes them unhappy and not feel good about themselves. But if you do find yourself in a situation where you feel truly in danger, then the classic thing in our field, of course, is you need to have a safety plan. And there are a number of different, websites that design good safety plans. The one I particularly recommend is listed here, domesticshelters.org. And I'm not going to go through all of these different items. They're really just here for your information. But things to do to take care of yourself if you're still in the relationship, or if you've already left the relationship and you fear you're in danger, or if you leave the relationship and are thinking of leaving, just some of the other things that some of the other measures you need to take. And as Don pointed out, it's something I think that most of us are in the field are familiar with. The greatest risk period for a woman in an abusive relationship is when she tries to leave. And so it's central to have some plans in place for if and when you're going to take that action, if you actually feel like you're in danger of some sort of physical abuse. Like I said, a lot of the situations we're talking about have not reached that level, and we're speaking to women who are more concerned about other kinds of issues as well. The one other summary comment that I want to make before we open it up to maybe some comments from Etione or any questions from the audience, or any other comments, of course, from you, Don, is that it would be easy to come away from this presentation and from our book thinking, oh my God, men are dangerous. And there's all these bad things that women need to stay away from, and there's all these checklists they have to use to make sure that they stay away from these bad guys. And that is the purpose of our book. But we want to really emphasize that there are plenty of good men out there. And in our brilliant wisdom and attempts at oversimplifying things, we've identified 3 types of men for our at least for the purposes of this the subject that we're talking about today. Number 1, men who are dangerous and are only likely to become more so. And they show, and with a lot of the different signs that we're talking about, they score high on those signs, unfortunately. And we want women to recognize men like that and stay away. 2, men who have some of these issues, but have the capacity to turn things around. And so our advice to women involved with a man like that is, if you think you got potentially a good thing going here, be careful. You know, the signs we're talking about are risky. See, you know, just keep your eyes and ears open. It may turn out okay or might not. And there's category 3, men who respect women and are excellent candidates for healthy relationships. We believe that most men are actually in category number 3, not abusive, not into power and control, and not a threat. The conclusion is stay away from the dangerous men. Welcome the men who will treat you well and you can count on, and proceed with cautious optimism with the men who have issues and appear to want to change. So the only other thing I would say, just as a reminder again and again, is that we do not want women to come away from this feeling like it's their fault if somehow they get stuck in a relationship or they have difficulty leaving a relationship that is troublesome or with an abusive guy. It's the abuser's fault. But we recognize it's complex, and we're just trying to give women as many tools and options as possible for keeping themselves safe. And although keep saying it's the last thing I'm going to say, one more I'm going to say is just identifying a guy as being safe by the criteria we're talking about here doesn't guarantee that the relationship's that the people are going to live happily ever after. Everything's going to be perfect. A lot of things have to be lined up to have a successful relationship. What we can say with confidence is that if men do not pass this test of providing safety, there's no way there's going to be a decent relationship. If they do pass this test, there's at least a good chance that you and this person could make something work. So at this point, let me turn this back over to.
I'll add my last 2 cents, if I may.
Yes.
I started this presentation indicating that my granddaughter Anna lived with me for 2 summers. I'm absolutely delighted to indicate that next June she's getting married. So she has found a safe and really good guy to hook up with. The second item is, when I was in that rehab center and thought of my granddaughters and others in my life, I was thinking that somehow we would write this book, and that you, the audience, would help us bring this book to the attention of every female undergraduate who's entering college. They are at a critical point in looking for an intimate partner. And I want to make sure my granddaughters and all of your granddaughters have that safe, informed decision to choose him wisely. Please help us disseminate this book, bring it to the attention. As some of the people who have endorsed the book indicate, buy dozens of these books and give it out to all your relatives, all your friends. And if you're still in the looking at the mate for a follow-up person, read the book. It'll keep you safe. Thanks once again for your attention and interest. I hope you find the book as rewarding as we found in writing it together. And I hope you found this presentation is useful, and it will be recorded, and you can now share it with others. I now turn back to Etione to direct us the last period of time.
Don and David, I just want to thank you for the wonderful presentation, the timely presentation on this topic, and for your dedication for a lifelong commitment to these issues and to making our homes and our relationships safer for not only for women, but for everyone. So I want to thank you. Both of you have been incredible contributors to our society that way. And for me, as director of the Institute, it's an incredible honor to have you as part of this educational program. I wanted to just for a moment, say something about this issue of the protective factors. And because it's a as a clinician, for many years I paid as much attention to protective factors as I did to risk factors, and because I always thought that it was a lot easier to move the needle on the protective factors than what we were trained in school. We were trained nothing about that in school, by the way. At the time I went to school, we never talked about that. So the metaphor I like to use is about like, we know often what we need to do to eat well. What we need to consume to really have a good health and really to be able to, what feels well in our gut, to use your metaphor, to help us sleep and so on, the exercise. But we again and again make the wrong choices into what we eat. A lot of sugar, a lot of cholesterol, a lot of processed. And sometimes it is as simple as taking a look at what's in your pantry and deciding that you're going to put in your pantry the type of foods that you want to cook that would move the needle in the direction of health and healing. And so you don't have to make that decision at the moment of cooking. It is there, you open it, and that's a statement of who you are. And I often think about relationships like that too. There are a lot of things that you don't have to work on. You just have to really move the needle at the individual, relational, community level. Engagement, men's engagements in relationships and context that disavow the use of violence against women. It's an important predictor of restraint, even for the most aggressive men. Is an important, if you know, and I used to, when I worked directly with men on this situation, I would really try to find out who are the people in your life who really think that what's happened is not right, that you really are better than this, that you should not, and really elaborate on that extensively with them to remind them that you are also this. You are also this nonviolent person who has the capacity to do that, in people that cares for you really also care about it. Anyhow, so tying us all those strings that really prevent people to really explode and realize the destructive potential that they do have. So I exhort people to look at that, because it's important really to look at the protective factors too. And I also wanted to bring out, and I know I will hear about it from some of my friends in the audience if I don't, to connect this conversation with the current climate of intimidation, misuse of power, abuses from the government, and the things that are going on that are affecting our lives right now. It is very difficult for most of us to make the right decisions on the conditions of fear and intimidation and constant concern. It's particularly difficult if you have a history of trauma, if you are really living in those, so because you're making decisions as a survivor in a context that is really intimidating. So I think your book right now is particularly important, because the level of stress that we're going through, the uncertainty, the realities that we're looking at day to day, not only through media, but also when we get back home, what we hear that happened, when we hear from our colleagues here in South Florida, is real. This is real. And I think a lot of people can fall through the cracks in that process, particularly vulnerable women in intimate relationships. So I invite you, all of you to make use of this knowledge and use this information and spread it as another tool, as another kind of like more fuel for people who really need support to live to make choices that are good for themselves and for others during these difficult times. And so anyhow, I just wanted to say that. I wanted to also make sure that I going back to the home economics before I give you a moment to make sure that you look at the chat for the phrase that you're going to need in order to get your continuing education credits. I want to remember to explore all the free resources that the Melissa Institute offers through the link library and our YouTube channel. And remember, you can upload everything you see there for free. With every training we do, with every resource we share, with every connection we make, we're strengthening our collective ability to protect minds and build safer, more resilient communities, families, and individuals. I want to thank you for being part of today's training. Together, I am convinced that we're making a difference. You are making a difference in the life of the people that you're working with. And you, David, and you, Donald, are making a difference in the life of all of us who really need the support and the guidance from experts like you. So thank you very much. And if you have anything that you want to say to close it up, I'll appreciate it.
No, feel free. The audience can feel free to contact me at dhmeich@aol.com. I'd be happy to address any questions. The final item is that I have put in memory of my wife a book on the internet called Roadmap to Resilience. And each of you can download the book for free. It is now gone to 53,000 people in 143 countries. So over and above what we've included in the Choose Him Safe Wisely book, you can turn to that roadmap to resilience.wordpress.com. And it's more than my lifetime desire to make the world a little bit safer for each of us. Thank you once again for joining us.
And if I can just say one more thing, I also am available for any of you to reach out at my email address here, which is posted on here. And just administratively, some people have asked about getting copies of the slides. That's fine with me. I will prepare a PDF and send it to I guess to Natalie, and I'm authorizing Natalie as if I have the authority to distribute that to people, because it's fine with me to have this information. I want you all to have this information, and we'll find a way to get it to you.
You're authorized to give us any kind of instructions you want, David.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
We if in the interest of time, I know we're coming to the end. We do have a couple of questions that perhaps we can help address. And one had to do with from our old friend and good friend, Holly Swerlin, from the Fatherhood Task Force of South Florida. For parents raising boys and girls, what parental behaviors should we be alerted to?
That's I'm just trying to narrow down an answer because there's so many different things that could go into that. But one thing that comes to mind for me is I would be particularly attentive to, I guess I would call it sexist type behaviors. And like in boys, I would be concerned about hearing them talking about girls in some derogatory term, using different kinds of slurs for referring to girls or women like bitches and things like that. That'd be something I would really want to confront and model differently in a boy that I was raising. And I don't know, that's one thing that comes to mind. Don, do you have anything to add to that?
Misogynist attitude towards women is inherent. It's from biblical times on. And therefore, the degree to which we as a society support women who are part of the Me Too movement, you know, all the women who are confronting the Epstein incident, and the degree to which they have the moral courage to confront perpetrators so they're held accountable. I think society in general. So I would have a conversation with my adolescent youth about the whole Epstein episode and how powerful men have an attitude towards women and how this sets everyone back. And therefore, I am encouraging that kind of protective factor to be part of the conversation between parents and children.
Thank you very much. There was a question that piggybacks nicely on this, having to do with the role of toxic masculinity in this issue and the extent to which you include assessing, considerations for including assessing toxic masculinity in your risk assessment.
Yeah. Well, as many of you know, the term toxic masculinity has become a very controversial term. So I try not to use it just because it sets people off. But the idea of toxic masculinity, of course, is very valuable, which is essentially being excessively or rigidly attached to certain masculine norms. So as long as we call it that, I'm fine. And yeah, I think that is, I guess we don't have a specific slide about that, but it's interwoven with some of the red flags about areas of male entitlement to have women take care of their needs in a certain way, feeling entitled to become aggressive or abusive when they do not get their needs met. Those are some of the things that I think that are part of the unfortunate training in terms of masculine norms that boys get growing up and that men get when they're grown up. And so I guess one thing to add to our screening list would be examples of men having sexist attitudes and believing in that and being especially preoccupied with being powerful or being respected. The more of that seems to be pervasive in that guy, the more that of a warning sign I would consider that to be.
I also think that men, young boys, should read our book. It's really informative on what makes for a good relationship. And I think they could learn a lot. So this Christmas, if you have nothing to give people for their stocking stuffer, you choose him wisely.
Sounds great. That's a great way to end, Don. And I want to thank you again, David and Don, and everybody else. And I would like the audience to please thank you to join me now and thanking them for this wonderful presentation, and wishing you both much health and a continued enlightenment to help continue helping the rest of us do better every day. All right. Take care, guys.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. It was a delight.
Likewise.